around. For you that don't know yet about Baumgar, we've been around for about 13 years, and we have been the leaders in the market when it comes to remote access from pretty much anyone to any given technology. And over the years, it was clear that the methodology that we use and the security that we use were the strongest from a security perspective. So we split the platform and started developing from a reactive remote support structure. We actually went to a privileged access base. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the reality of what's going on. What did I do? There you go. We're going to talk a little bit about what is happening in the market today, how exactly the attackers are succeeding, what are they looking for, and just ways to actually prevent it. So we're going to go through the problem, how it works, and then what would be our recommendation. That obviously is about what we do, because we wouldn't talk about something we don't know what to do. So, and then right after this part, we will have the demonstration. At any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We'll be happy to answer if we know it. So the premises of privileged access is always, do you know who you're inviting in? Do you really know who's coming into your environment, right? And the reality is that the amount of attacks that are happening is actually not going down. Even though there's more awareness, there's actually more attacks now than there were before, because they are becoming more sophisticated. They are learning new ways into figuring out who they want to attack and what is the best way to attack that specific company, individual. So they are actually getting much more sophisticated into the approach that they have into leveraging those privileged credentials for attacks. And their main objective is, how can I jump over the wall, right? The whole thing has always been perimeter security, perimeter security. If you put enough firewalls, you'll be fine. And then it was proven that is not the case. So we're going to walk through that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about specific phishing, because phishing is a methodology that has been working very well for the malicious attacker to actually gain access into environments. Is this pace good? Is this?
It was perfect.
Okay. So the reality today is a little bit different than what it used to be, and maybe you guys are still in transition in some environments where you were able to keep everything closed in your network. Now you have all the providers that are either cloud-based, or they're offering software as a service, or even you have partners that have a know-how that you don't have. So you need their services from different locations in order to achieve your goals. So you have partners, you have suppliers, you have service providers, you have employees that need to have access that are no longer in your office. They could be anywhere. But they have to have access to very critical systems. So when we talk about the privileged access, we're talking about the privileged accounts that they actually are. Today, everything is technology-based pretty much. So everything that is technology-based has a credential associated with it, has a specific access that give them authority to interact with other devices within the environment. So collectively, they allow you to either make a bank transaction, import files, or transfer information from one database to another database, or verify something in one location in order to perform a service outside of your environment. So all of this are called like the super user, right? That those credentials, those privileged access accounts are the ones that the hackers are looking for, because they're everywhere, they're powerful, they have, you and I are users, we have a little bit of access. We don't have that much access. We can get into our Outlook, we can get into maybe a shared file system that other people can collaborate, but we cannot go into an administrative system and do whatever we want, right? So we have, as people, we have limited access. But those powerful privileged accounts, they can pretty much work in different areas of your environment, especially on critical systems. And a lot of times they are shared. They have to be shared because many applications, many systems are sharing those credentials in order to work together. And lastly, they're anonymous. A lot of times you don't even know where they are. They can be hard-coded inside of a script. They can be part of a system that is a little bit easier to find. And sometimes they're very hard to change because if you change it in one place, they actually breaks everywhere else, right? So it's like I was saying before, the problems now are more. The more we know, it seems that there's more types of attacks. And based on the Forrester, 80% of the security breaches involve the usage of that administrative account. So let's talk about, a little bit so we talked about how those privileged accounts actually can access anything without having a specific credential, right? Those credentials, usually because they're shared, what happens is that you end up writing them down somewhere, and more than one person actually knows them, and they leave the company, or they are forgotten somewhere, but you don't want to change it because if you change it, you can break something. So there's all those risks associated with it. So the confirmed data breaches, 63% of them involved either people kept the default password that came from the manufacturer, or they were weak so they could remember, right? So if they're forgotten, they have to have somebody have to reset it. They keep things simple. Guess what? What do the administrators want to do? Their jobs. They really don't want to mess up with anybody. They feel they're trustworthy. So they say, hey, if you give me the password, I promise I will use it nice. But don't give me a hard one. So they use easy credentials so they can log in and work everywhere. So how does a breach really happen, right? Just imagine that you'll have, let's talk a little bit about like if it was credit card company. How do attackers try to get into your system? Well, they try to impersonate somebody that should have the access in order to gain initial entrance, right? So that we call them, they look for how they're going to get in. So that's called the reconnaissance. So once they decide who's going to be, could be the CIO of a company, or it could be somebody in human resources. Where do they go? LinkedIn. Facebook. They find information about certain people, and then they look at a little search, and they find out where their children go to school, or they find out something about that person. And then they look at somebody else higher up in this company. So this is a low-level person that feels pressured if somebody higher up than them asks them for a favor, for example. So then they look at the CFO of a company, and they get information about this person, and then they create an account on Gmail, Hotmail, or even they can even create one domain that is they just bought it for that purpose. And they create that name just like if it was a company person, like a CIO of a corporation, they create their email address. So they send from that email address a message to this known email address, which is the company email address, for this HR person that they know a lot about it. So they go like, hey, I hope your daughter so-and-so is doing well. Hey, I am on vacation this week, but I really need you to send me information about this 10 people because I'm going to have to approve their raises or whatever they're going to talk about, whatever is going to entice that lower level person to comply to a request from the CEO or the CIO or the CFO of a company. So they use this is called phishing, right? They kind of like, they find a really good way of making somebody do the work for them. So they get either files or they get access accounts. The other way of doing that is somebody impersonating an IT person and saying, hey, I'm in IT, we're doing something to make sure everybody's passwords are up to date and they are difficult. So I just want to make sure your password is hard enough. You have a combination of letters, numbers, special characters, but there's some characters that we don't accept. So what is your password so I can make sure that is okay? So they know the name of the IT person because it's in LinkedIn. They know the name of that HR person because that HR person is also public information. So they get access into with one password, with one small access as a user. Well, once they get into that entrance, that low-level entrance gives them ability to do the infiltration, and then they look for vulnerabilities inside of those systems in order to stay for a while and look for passwords. So they may break something that forces that user to call help desk. And then when help desk answers, they have to enter their administrative password. Once they enter their administrative password, that host, that attacker that is living in this individual computer now has an administrative password that they have copied. Guess what? Now they can leapfrog into another machine as an administrator and keep gaining access until they find the information they want to exfiltrate. So they do the infiltration, they do the exploitation, and then at the end of it, they're able to exfiltrate, and they can do that over a period of months. They can sit in without being noticed for a very long time. That's what I was saying, where it is very sophisticated. So, so there's all these layers, right? When you talk about the credential, we talked about the credentials being privileged credentials. But when you look at it, the privileged credential really got used around over here. It wasn't here, and it wasn't here, right? So how did they get all the way in there? How do we stop them before they actually come in? The chances are you might already have somebody just nesting in your environment, waiting to exfiltrate information. So you could have already that inherent risk. So there's no more firewall that can go tall enough, or you make your moat deeper and bigger and you throw some crocodiles in there. But there is no more way of keeping that attacker for actually going and jumping over that fence. You can't do that. So you have to take other measures, right? So VPNs, we were talking. A lot of companies now, their big topic is we got to get rid of VPNs for privileged access. Why? Because once the privileged access is made by a VPN connection, well, that you don't know really who that person is. You given access to a computer, not necessarily a person, access to your environment. But once they pass that firewall, nothing is stopping them from pivoting, from jumping, leapfrogging. There's so many terms to describe what they can do once they're in. So the VPN is the wall that they crashed, the firewall that they went through, right? So they were given a key to get in. That's what they did. So there's nothing really there's very little things that you can do. Not a good strategy if you have critical systems that you're trying to protect. But you know what? I'm trustworthy, you're trustworthy, your admins are trustworthy, but we all have a price. And especially in Latin America, where everybody's very conscious about physical security, you understand threat, you understand kidnapping, you understand a lot of things. There's certain things that a person might not have control over. They might be forced to do something to protect a loved one, or they might be even being used by somebody else without knowing. So internal threat to critical systems is also very important. And a lot of them, because people are inside of their network, they really don't have good measures to know what they're doing when they are doing their regular work on a system as well, right? So a lot of organizations, they do feel that they don't have knowledge or control of what their super administrators are doing, because all the administrators want access to everything. And this is just not a good strategy. And hoping they're not going to do anything is not a good strategy. So my goal here today is to help you understand that there are ways to diminish the risk. And so how can the technology piece help, right? Well, there's certain things that technology alone can't really help, right? So for example, when the phishing side, you have to educate the people. And what is the biggest vulnerability of any company? People. You know, there's just some things that they want to do their work faster. There is a little app, they download that app. It's free, download, and it comes with a gift that you weren't expecting. It's malicious code or something like that. So phishing is a part of it, education, training, and then there's also some software that helps you capture specific words of known phishing attacks. Until that phishing attack becomes popular, it's still ground zero, right? So you still have to do a lot of education. Then there is the second level, right? On the infiltration level, what was compromised? Somebody's identity was compromised. So identity and access management, multi-factor authentication, and behavior analytics are the hot words on the market today for controlling those types of risk. But some of those things that are here, behavior and analytics. Do you get behavior analytics day one? What do you have to do to get analytics from? You have to wait a period of time, top, low, like you have to look at everything for 6 months to a year before you really can say, yeah, that is a normal behavior, this is not a normal behavior. So it's not something that you can just turn it on and say, I'm protected. It's going to take time. Identity management. Some of you might be going through identity management projects that are specific to cleaning up who has access to what. So I started at Bongar a couple of years ago. I've been promoted 4 times. So in 4 times, my access has changed. But my initial access was never revoked, right? Because that's common. You just go, oh, okay, so now she's no longer just in sales. She also has to get information about marketing. So now I have access to sales and have marketing. And then, well, I'm going to work in operations, and now I have access to financial information. And, you know, like, so I didn't get promoted 4 times, don't worry, you know. I was just illustrating. So those are, just one person can have a complexity on their identity. One person has to access multiple systems. So it gets complicated. You try to fix that. It's going to take what? You think it's going to take a week? No, it's going to take different groups. It's going to take different consulting services. It's going to take, you have to clean up identity before you can do identity management. Multi-factor authentication. That's a pretty easy thing to get going. That's something you can get started with just to ensuring that who you say you are, it is really who you are. So you have something that you are, and then something's given to you if you have those other 2, right? So that is a very good and important way of adding a little bit of security fast. The other one is like when you're doing exploitation, there's a lot of things that are happening inside of your environment. All of those activities actually can get captured if you have a SIM like ArcSight, or you can have all your systems output logs into a SIM device. That SIM device then has the ability to do alerts. Alerts will help you during the exploitation phase. And then analyze, again, you have to have enough knowledge of what is normal in order to do analysis of an abnormal situation. And then finally, you know, you have encryption of information, and then forensics for after the fact. Great. Already happened. Well, let's go find out what got stolen. Well, that's not really also a good strategy, right? So where do you want to stop? Where would you like to stop this from happening, right? You want to stop as high up as you can. You don't want to wait until you get over here to actually take action. So this is kind of like the technologies and the ways that you can actually utilize different layers of actions that combined will give you the best available solution today. So today we're going to focus on the controlling the privilege access. It's actually a very short period of time required to slow down, because nothing is 100% secure, right? If anybody comes to you and say you're going to be 100% secure tomorrow because you have one product, just show them the door, because that's usually not the case. So So you can assume that the risk is always going to be there, that people are going to make mistakes, and all of that. So privileged access can be up and running literally in days. It's based on some information you already have, like Active Directory, LDAP. You already have groups associated with the organization that you have. So you can control access a lot faster than you can control credentials. You still need to control the credentials. But at least you're buying yourself some time to do the credentials correctly, to then understand how those credentials interface with each other, and then address the credentials as part of a bigger project, right? And it has to work with other technologies. You cannot put a security technology that stops the business from working, so you cannot interrupt how people are getting their days through it. So that's a very important thing, right? But you want to stop the infiltration through privileged access management. So it's almost the same thing that, this is the analogy of using a hotel, something that we can relate to. Here, I like to say that every building I went in the last 3 days, we had to show passport, we had to tell who he was, they verified that actually the meeting was going to happen before they let us in, and then we got little RFIDs, which we had to carry with us the whole time. So you guys get security. You know, it's not any different in the cyberspace. You still need the same measurements on cyber language, right? So instead of using these, I mean, I think that you guys get it. It's just, you use it every day. So obviously, privileged access, what are you trying to protect? You're trying to protect the access. So, like I said, you already have groups, you already have organizations, you already have business owners, you already have a lot of the strategic piece of it for privileged access to work. You know when your IT people, they know when the systems should be touched and when they shouldn't. They know what your most important times of the month are for accounting. They know those things, right? So those are known knowledge, known processes that you have to translate into how can the technology help enforce them. So you have the processes. Who's the enforcer? Privileged access management is the enforcer. Managing the activity. Okay, how many of you guys have a third-party vendor that comes in based on a contract? That you really just have to let them in through a VPN, and you really, you know, when they're done, they tell you they're done, but you don't really know what they did while they were there. Right? At least, well, one honest one. You probably all have it. and so wouldn't you... Once you get the bill that says that IBM was inside of your network for 30 hours to do some AS400 upgrade, and you go like, okay, I don't know, it's working. All right, sign the check. Here you go, IBM, $30,000 right there. What about if you could actually see the real utilization of those third-party vendors, what they're doing in your environment? If they had a VPN, you won't get that control. If what they're doing, you have no idea. Well, if you have a privileged access management solution, you're recording the session, you're capturing what they're doing during that process. So not only you can go back and see if something breaks, you can see and fix it, but also you can learn what those third-party vendors are doing, and maybe you won't need them the next time. So you get your people more prepared, your people more educated as well. So there are several benefits, but you manage the activity, you analyze the data, because now you know how often people access and what they access. So let's say I want access because I'm an administrator. I want access to 100 servers because I am super Camila, but I only have 24 hours on a day, and I only have 40 hours that I'm going to work on a week. So can I really access 100 servers? The reality is it's going to be 4 or 5 servers that I'm actually going to need access all the time. The other 96 are going to be sitting there exposed with access that I shouldn't have. So if I need to go to the other ones, I can just say, hey, I got to do something here. I have a change ticket. Remember when we went through has to integrate with your IT infrastructure? Well, it's integrated with your ticketing system. I got to change control. Now I can analyze the data because everything that I did was related. to something already you have, right? So, and integrating with the other solutions, like I said, you need to alerting, you need a lot of things that we don't do. Privilege access is what we do. There's a lot of things you already have, and there's other things you need to get it. So, so those are the integrations you have to actually, wow, I'm fast. So this is what we were talking about, right? You already made some investments, maybe not all of them. But if you have a lot of technology, you definitely have to have a way of fixing them, right? So you might have an inside ticketing system, or you might have a software that you purchase to do management. Authentication, like a lot of you might have the requirement, others might not, but if you have PCI compliance, if you have any type of regulatory compliance, you will have to have some of those tools. Active Directory and LDAPs. Okay, so nowadays everybody has some type of Active Directory or LDAP system. And then SIM systems for the alerting, as well as SAML connectivity for other devices. So password management, right? Very important. You might be doing it today with an Excel spreadsheet that is, that everybody has a copy and is inside of their first drawer because they need to have access to it fast. Or it might be written on a sticky note underneath the keyboard. And your administrators, it's secure, it's under the keyboard, so it's not there on the monitor at least, right? But that is not really the best way to keep administrative passwords around the IT department. But you know what? Oh, you need to have your badge to get into the IT department. This you guys do really well. So it's more secure than in US, by the way. But when you have the solution that can actually integrate with everything, you actually, now we're talking about, it's organizing, it's helping you keep the controls that you already put in place. But I can have all the features in the world. I can say, if you put my product in, you're going to be so secure, nothing's going to happen. You know what that means? I went into your data center and I unplugged everything, I powered it down, and nobody can access. But what happens when nobody can access? Nobody's working, right? So it has to work. It has to work. It has to be easy. It has to be secure, but it has to be easy to use. It has to be intelligent. It has to be flexible. It has to work as the people already used to work, right? So it's difficult. It's very difficult to accomplish that. So if you go into the mentality that you are just as secure as the vendor you're inviting in, how much do you know about what security your vendor is supposed to have? Would you put your hand in the fire for it? No, right? So here is, if you consider everybody is low privilege, unless you need privilege, that's what we are talking here. We're saying this is a way to keep your risk as low as you can at a cost that is really a lot lower than the damage that it can create, right? So we're talking about something achievable that is not going to completely break the bank or take you away from your focus of business, right? We are not saying security is what manages your business. So compliance, how many compliant, regulatory compliance rules do you have to follow? You have to make a list, right? You have to involve the groups that are part of it to tell you what you need and not do. So all of them focus on, and there's a bunch of them that might not be applicable here, but I know PCI is. I know Sarbanes-Oxley is. You have a lot of process controls that are part of your needs. If you're doing business with international companies, guess what? You have to abide by the international rules as well. It might be a business decision, not a regulatory one, but it still applies. So limiting the access, audit trail. So like I said before, you have to know what is happening in order to manage, right? If you don't know what you have, you can't manage. And obviously that multi-factor authentication, very important, is something that you can even get free ones nowadays with Google Authenticator. You really don't have to go and full-blown. Obviously an enterprise base for a company is a better way to go, but you don't have to wait for your company to to have a whole project dedicated to multi-factor to start being more secure. So our recommendations, I think I kind of been recommending the whole presentation, but ongoing security education, that's a journey. Education is never a one-stop shop here. This is something you have. People only retain. So today, you guys going out of here with about 10% of what I said. That's the average of what a person really gets, you know, from any type of new education. And you have to look at it from a big bang for the buck, what we say in English, right? So how can I get the most, the fastest, with as little as possible? So that's one of the things, right? Consider security technology not as locking it so much down that nobody's using it, but give them something that it can really quickly show you progress, right? So privilege access is one of those things. Ease of implementation, like I said, weeks instead of months, years that it would take to really do identity, privileged identity management from a credential perspective. And then other solutions, leverage the solutions you already have in place, make them work better for you, like the groups, the information that you already have. Use what you have to the best, and as you're doing a new project, clean up the stuff that is not working. Take advantage that you have a new project in place, we have a privilege access, and find out what your people are doing. Or if you don't want them to know you're doing that, you put the solution in place, then you make the analysis, you keep it kind of open, and then once you have a feeling of where they go, then you say, okay, you don't really need this, I can tighten up without scaring anybody. So there's many different ways to actually educate as well as implement a successful privilege access solution. Compliance, obviously, you know, you have to understand what the requirements are in order to prepare for them. And then, like I said, this is critical. This too, password management and two-factor authentication it's very critical. So I'm not saying privilege access is the only thing you're going to need. It's not. You need to have layers. Otherwise, you're as vulnerable as your weakest link.